Hey friend, welcome back to Bible Tract Echoes. I'm Mike McCurry, your host. Thank you so very much for tuning in once again today. Aren't you glad that God knows exactly, precisely, specifically where you are? I'm thankful for that. Today on the broadcast, we're going to continue to hear a message titled, When It Rains, It Pours. Now, oftentimes when you hear a preacher on the radio that's not Mike McCurry's voice, you're hearing Dr. Paul Levine. Well, today, I'm going to share the microphone with a man much younger than Dr. Paul Levine, a man named Zach Carmen. He's an assistant pastor. He works at a good church in southern or central Indiana. He's a friend of mine, and he preached this message at my father-in-law's 40th anniversary as the pastor of our home church, the First Baptist Church in Dwight, Illinois. And he did such a remarkable job, it stuck with me. And I think it will be a help to you. What he's going to speak about today is this fact: God knows where you are. The message title, When It Rains, It Pours. If you missed any of the previous broadcasts, go find them on demand on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure to get those. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Now listen to Brother Zach Carmen as he speaks to us.
Many of you have been through things where it feels like, in the first sense that we talked about of when it rains, it pours, that it's just trial after trial after trial, and it seems like there is no way out. But as we look at Joseph's life, we'll see what point number 2 is. It's treasure through the trials. Treasure through the trials. If you'll go back with me to, if you'll go with me to Job 23, we'll start there. Job chapter 23. I told you there's a couple people that I think about in the Bible when I think about people that have gone through trials, people that have gone through things, and that they came out on the other side. But Job chapter 23, probably one of my favorite chapters. I've worked through Job with the teens in our church for a little bit. But Job chapter 23 and verse 1, this is Job's answer to Eliphaz, and Eliphaz essentially accusing him, saying that there must be some sort of wickedness in your life. That's the reason all these things are happening to you. Boy, what a good friend, right? What a good friend that comes to you when you're down and says, you must be wicked and awful. That's why God is doing these things to you. We know the real story. We know that's not what it is. And so this is Job's response in Job chapter 23. It says that Job answered and said, even today is my complaint bitter. My stroke is heavier than my groaning. Oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come even to his seat. I would order my cause before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would know the words which he would answer me and understand what he would say unto me. Will he plead against me with his great power? No, but he would put strength in me. There the righteous might dispute with him, so should I be delivered forever from my judge. Behold, I go forward, but he is not there, and backward, but I cannot perceive him. On the left hand where he doth work, but I cannot behold him. He hideth himself on the right hand, that I cannot see him. But he knoweth the way that I take. When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. My foot hath held his steps. His way have I kept and not declined. Neither have I gone back from the commandment of his lips. I have esteemed the words of his mouth more than my necessary food. And so as I look at this passage, you could see Job almost broken here, saying that I've gone forward, I've gone backward, I've gone to the left, I've gone to the right, I've gone everywhere looking for him, and it doesn't seem like I could find him. But in verse 10, he said, essentially what he's saying is it doesn't matter. He says, but he knoweth the way that I take. It doesn't matter if I could find him. It doesn't matter if I feel like my prayers are being heard the way that I want them heard, because all that matters is he knows where I'm at. All that matters is that God knows exactly where I am. He knows exactly what I need. He says, when he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. You come forth more valuable and stronger than you went in. And so we see in the next verses, he talks about my foot hath held his steps. His way have I kept and not declined. Neither have I gone back from the commandment of his lips. In other words, I've continued following God. I've never stepped back from him. I've never backslidden. I've never stepped aside. I've never turned to the right or to the left. I have followed God this whole time, telling his friend essentially, how dare you accuse me of this? But I really like the last part of verse 12. It says, I have esteemed the words of his mouth more than my necessary food. You know, we know the hard times that Job is going through. We know the physical ailments that he's going through at this time. Boils from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet, excruciating pain to the point where he takes a potsherd and scrapes himself off. Extreme pain. But we see here that what he's telling God is that, or what he's telling his friend is that I need God's word more than my necessary food. Not just food that I want, not just food that I desire, but food that I need. I put his words above that. It's an important thing. If we're going to make it through trials, if we're going to truly be able to say that when it rains, it pours, then you must remain faithful. You must remain faithful to the Lord. You must take a stand and say that no matter what, I'm going to trust him. And through these months of all these things that have been going on in my own personal life, I told my wife, I said, I know you're going to hate me for saying this, but the only thing that I could think of is the title of that message, When It Rains, It Pours. The only thing I could think of is I'm going to try to find God's blessing in this. I'm going to try to find the good in this situation. I'm going to look for it. I believe as Pastor Woodward would tell us, he said, if you come to church expecting nothing, you're going to get nothing. And so, I'm going to go to God expecting something. I'm going to go to God expecting great things to happen. When my boy was sick and in the hospital, I remember there were times that I'd go up to the church by myself. I'd go to the altar. I'd go and pray, and I'd just weep. Because any parent just wants their child to be healthy. Any parent just wants everything to be okay. Wants everything to be perfect, for there to be nothing wrong. And so when there is something wrong, it's heartbreaking. And I sat there and I begged God, please. And probably the hardest prayer that I've had to preach is sitting there praying, asking God, please, and then at the end of that prayer, saying, Lord, I want this, but only if it's your will. I want to see a miracle. I want to see a great thing done in his life, but I only want it if it's your will. It's a hard pill to swallow when you essentially tell God, if it's not your will, it's okay. I'll be okay. I'll still trust you. I'll still follow you. And so, if you will, with me, go back to the book of Genesis. Say we looked at Joseph in the trials, and now we're going to look at Joseph's treasure in the trials. And so, when he was sold into slavery, say what happened there is we see in chapter 37 and verse 21. Genesis chapter 37, verse 21, it says, and Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. And so what his brothers wanted to do was kill him, but there's a little treasure in this trial that one brother said, let's not kill him. Well, let's not do that. And so there's a blessing there. If you go to chapter 39 and verse 2. Chapter 39 and verse 2, it says, in chapter 39, verse 2, and the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man. He was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had put into his hand. And then go down to verse 21 and 22. It says, but the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. So we see in this chapter that even though he's been sold into slavery, he's been sold into Potiphar's house, God was with him and promoted him. God was with him and put him in a place of authority. And even when he was in prison, the keeper of the prison put him in a place of authority. And so we go to chapter 41, verse 8. Chapter 41, verse 8. And it says that it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men thereof, and Pharaoh told them his dream. But there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. So this is after Pharaoh's dreams, and it's troubled him to the point, it's troubled his spirit. And so he's looking for an answer. We go down to verse 16. This is right after the butler forgot him in chapter 40, verse 23. It says that Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. And so we see here that it wasn't just by happenstance that the butler forgot Joseph. Joseph stood before Pharaoh at the right time. Joseph stood before Pharaoh at a time that Pharaoh needed some help. Pharaoh was troubled, and he got put before Pharaoh at a point where Pharaoh was looking for someone to help him and was willing to help the person that helped him. And so we move on to chapter 41 and verse 37. Verse 37, it says, "And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. And the Pharaoh said unto his servants, Can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, For as much as God has showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou." And so we see here that he's been promoted. Okay, he's been promoted by Pharaoh. He's been lifted up. And what amazes me in this passage is we see Pharaoh, an Egyptian, somebody who is probably most likely a heathen, doesn't believe in God. He looks at Joseph and says, "I see God in him." And he begins to he talks about whom the Spirit of God is. You know, I want to be so filled with the Spirit of God that people in the world could tell that I'm filled with the Spirit of God. I want to be so Christian, or in other words, Christ-like, that people in the world have no question about it. That there's no doubt in their mind that when I'm around this guy, he is a Christian. You know, it's funny how sometimes you'll sit with people. I remember just a few weeks ago in the midst of all this, to say I was driving to Bloomington to pick up some flowers for our church for Mother's Day. And my car started shaking real bad. I said, "Oh no." I had a pretty good idea what it was, and so I thought, I'll just get to an auto parts store. Well, then it started shaking worse. And so I said, well, I'm not going to sit here and total my car. So I had it towed. I get in there, and the tow truck driver at first is just mad, and he's like, "Well, it's a really busy day," and da-da-da-da-da. I'd already sent my wife. We had some family that lives in Bloomington, so they came and picked her up. And so he's in there, and he's cussing and all these things. And so I hand him a tract and said, "I'm the assistant pastor at Calvary Baptist Church in Linton." And he just froze. "I've been cussing like a sailor. I'm so sorry, da-da-da." But the important thing is that they know. That they know that there's something different about you.
What a testimony Zach has. What a testimony he shared with us. It's amazing to think how careful, despite all that has been going on in Zach's life, all the things, but to make sure that God is being seen through us. For Zach to make sure God is being seen through him. I wonder if I've got to think about myself here. Am I as careful as Zach has been, despite all he's gone through in recent days, he and his dear family? Am I as careful to make sure God is seen through me? I sure hope so. We'll plan on continuing and concluding this broadcast tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in to Bible Tract Echoes. You're going to want to hear the last installment of this message titled, "When It Rains, It Pours." Make sure to tune in. Thank you so much for listening. My prayer, as always, is that you have a great day for God's glory. Remember, God knows where you are. We'll plan on talking to you soon. God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to Bible Tract Echoes, the radio ministry of Bible Tracts Incorporated. Want to see our gospel tracts and other resources? Visit us online at BibleTractsInc.org. That's BibleTractsInc.org. Or follow us on social media to learn how you can partner with this ministry. Thanks again for listening. May the Lord richly bless you as you live for Him.